Hey guys, good morning. It's Sunday, sometime in late March. I think today's the 29th, I think, and we are just 2 weeks from the end of Tactical Jackalope's Top Speed Build Contest. And I'm Will, and I'm back for another update. I know I said that I once again said that I wouldn't be back until I was done, but even though I thought that I would be by now, I am actually on an enforced hiatus because things have, as the Scottish poet said, the best laid plans of mice and men have gang after gley, which just means it's a bit off the rails and I'm in major freaking the fuck out mode. Basically, this whole thing hinges around my ability to produce my own decals. And there's two things you should be aware of if you ever decide to go down that road. One is that anything white is going to be a deal breaker for all practical purposes. I believe that factory decals are silk screened, and so they have no limitations on what colors they can produce, including white. But if you are printing them on your own inkjet or laser printer, you know there's no white ink. And there's only one kind of printer that does do it, and that's called an ALPS printer. And those things are out of production and basically as rare as hen's teeth. So if you're going to do your own, just be aware of that. You can print on white paper and hopefully, trim appropriately. But then you're going to run into the second issue that I've unfortunately not found out about until I got down to this point, and that is that even with your printer running on maximum ink density, which it needs to be to get all the colors really nice. The decals that you print yourself are going to be much more transparent than the ones that come in a kit. I mean, I use a top-end photography printer because I'm a photographer, and I can print at nearly 6,000 dots per inch. And yet, when I went to lay down some decals for the first time, they look terrible. I've got a couple of places in this paint scheme where I go from one color to another, and the dividing line showed up as plain as day underneath the decal. So I am busy trying to figure out a solution, and I have one that I think could work, but it's going to be dependent on a third-party supplier, and I'm waiting for an answer from them that hopefully will come tomorrow, and I can get back on the road, because I'm sitting here looking at a bird with all her colors laid down, and I could literally be finished in 2 or 3 days if I could decal. But it is what it is, and it's got to work. So hopefully I'll get it figured out. But most of the last week or two has been spent in paint, and that's been an adventure. There's lots to talk about there. I'm not going to try and wear you out with all the details, but as I mentioned in the beginning, I was using some paints that I'd never had used before, and those are the House of Color urethanes, and they've really been fantastic. Super good stuff. They're pretty hot, but the colors are just amazing. And I also, as you know, had been dealing with some alclad, and I had some problems with that a lot of people don't have. And this is where, it kind of comes down to, having the right tool. And things are not always as obvious as they would seem. Any of you guys who have worked with alclad know that the recommendation says right there on the bottle is to spray it at like 15 psi, and the assumption is that you're using a double action airbrush, and that's obviously a formula that's proven to work for most people, most being the key word. I am not using a double action airbrush. My main airbrush that I use for almost all my stuff is this little Iwata HP M2, and it has a 0.4 millimeter needle. It's internal mix, but the key thing that differentiates it is that it's single action. So that means that when you push the button, all you're doing is controlling airflow. And I chose that because with my dexterity issues, double action just doesn't seem, at least at the time, like something that I could really get a grip on, literally. But anyway, you adjust the paint flow on this thing with the needle. You just screw it in and out, and it's kind of a set and forget kind of a thing. And that's really good for most things, but there are situations where it's a real weakness because you're not able to move the needle in and out on the fly. You can't sort of, open it wide up and blow a big blast of air through to clear things out if it's not flowing. And I ran into that with the alclad aluminum, where basically I can't even get the stuff to begin to come out of this airbrush at anything less than about 30 to 35 psi. And that's because there's so much superfine pigment in that alclad aluminum that it basically just packs up the nozzle based on gravity alone. And there's nothing that the little thing can do to clear itself out. So that's been a bit of an adventure, and I found the solution, as is sometimes the case, by just going back to basics, going old school. I bought myself a pancake. I have no idea how you're supposed to say it. Pache, posh, whatever. Anyway, I bought myself a pancake H model for about, I think, a total of about $60. And I bought it with medium-sized needle from Coast Airbrush. And, I bought this thing after watching one of Adam Savage's videos where he uses one and talks about the fact that when he was at Industrial Light and Magic, he showed up with his super-duper double-action, high-speed, big-dollar airbrush and discovered that all the veteran modelers were using one of these. This thing is just butt simple, single action, external mix. You can put bottles on it, and it's just bulletproof. And I bought it because I wanted to be able to spray large areas of clear coat, which is going to be coming up here pretty soon, primers, and anything that was difficult for the other airbrush. The alclad aluminum, it flies out of this thing like it's being chased by a stampede. Absolutely no problem, but it's at about 30 psi. So, again, you just sometimes have to question the rules that you've been told, and think a little bit outside the box, and don't assume that just because the formula is well established that it's necessarily the right one in your case. So anyway, it's been good. Otherwise, I've been clear coating some parts. I started that yesterday, and I'm really happy with the results. I've been clear coating like the prop and landing gear doors and the radiator scoop and bits and pieces that are separate. And I'm using, after lots of searching over the last 6 months for the magic clear coat, I've been through Future and gloss clear lacquer, and I've experimented with some testers that I think is a lot like the alclad aqua gloss. And the fact is that while all of them do a pretty decent job for different levels of gloss, none of them give you the really wet, deep, glossy look that a show car or a race plane needs to have. For that, you're going to have to go, again, like I have done on some other things, back to some basics that I knew from before. and that is to use a two-part automotive clear. They also call them 2-pack or 2K because you've got the base material, and then you've got to mix it with this hardener to get it to activate, and it basically goes on. It creates a hard polymer shell that's UV resistant, fuel resistant, whatever, and it's amazing. But it is super toxic. You've got to definitely have ventilation and a mask. But look, that's the way it is. I mean, sometimes if you want to get a gourmet omelet, you're going to have to break some real eggs and not use any of that, Nancy Boy egg white substitute shit. And that's how I am. I don't do decaf or sugar free or diet or low cal. Do what it takes, and that's all there is to it. So, if you can get next to it, and you're doing like any car models or anything like that, it's a good way to go if you can figure out how to work with the stuff. And I've been really happy with the results. I just spent an hour unmasking the canopy, which I know sounds crazy. How do you spend an hour unmasking the canopy? What you have to remember is that this canopy was masked on both sides, and so there's a lot of tape in there. I know Paul was laughing at me because I did it, with my own masks using 3M fine line tape and masking tape and bare metal foil and micro mask fluid, which sucks, by the way. But I didn't have any choice because not only were I didn't have Edward masks that were pre-cut, but there weren't any masks for the inside. So, and there's 6 layers of paint on this thing between the primer, the interior gray, the base coat silver on the outside, the color coat, and the clear coat. So I had to be very careful when peeling off all of that masking because one thing I've learned is, especially with these acrylics that are just so fragile, that sometimes the mask will tear the paint right off. And that's the worst, man, when you've spent all this time perfectly masking and painting a canopy and you get a chip right there on the edge of the frame in a super high visibility area that everybody's naturally going to be looking right at. And all that hard work is ruined, and you've got to figure out how to unfuck it. So I was being super careful with peeling off all of my tape, and I'm really happy. I've got one tiny little goober that I don't think anybody will see, and overall I feel really happy with the way that with the way it looks. So if the windscreen unmasks and looks as good, it's gonna be sweet. But anyway, that's been most of the adventure over the last few weeks. This last 7 days, 10 days has been a real roller coaster. I started out a week ago having one of the most amazing experiences of my entire life on a completely unrelated area, where I just got really reconnected with some really positive energy that I really needed in my life, and that was good. But then I got into the week and things were just going up and down with painting, and finding out that the decals weren't working the way I needed them to, and then some other frustrations in the last couple of days, and it's been a wild ride. But that's what's good about something like model building, or any kind of hobby really. I felt the same way about when I was riding and racing dirt bikes, is that if you've got that one thing that you can turn to, where no matter what the ups and downs are within that arena, you can always depend on it as a way to escape, I guess, from whatever other bullshit's going on in your life. And I know a lot of you guys have found the therapeutic value of spending time at your workbench. So it's a good thing. And I certainly appreciate you guys spending time with me at my workbench and listening once again to all my drivel. I promise the next time you hear from me about this project, it's either going to be done and I'll be celebrating, or I'll be sitting here very sheepishly telling you that I bit off more than I can chew. But either way, you know, we just press on. That's all we can do, and hope for the best. So anyway, thanks again. I hope that the coming week is a good one for you guys. And as always, I appreciate you hanging out. Much love. Hey, what's up, Fuzzy?